Hello everybody and welcome to Channel 2S. I'm Second Soundwave and today I'm going to be looking at the SH Figuarts Kamen Rider Agito Ground Form Renewal version. This is the first SH Figuart I have bought in quite a while. I got this really cheap on HobbyLink Japan during their holiday sale, but this figure will generally run you like $30 to $40, and at that price I definitely think it's worth it. I'll get into that in a moment, but first I'd just like to talk about the box. Front of it here, it's very nice. It's got like a kind of matte, very high quality finish. This feels like the box you'd get like an iPhone in or something. It's very nice quality. Nice big picture of him there. It's got like a kind of flat black thing on the side with his name. SH Figuarts logo on top and bottom. It's a little dirty there on the bottom just because I had it sitting around on stuff. But yeah, you go to the back. As you can see, it's very posable. A lot of information on the back. And then instead of most Figuart boxes where it's like a standard kind of Figma style box, this one opens like just like that, and it's just beautiful. You can see the figure right up inside here. You can take this out. You got a nice little manual. Inside the box you got a nice meaningful message from the designer that I cannot read. And then you got his accessories down there. And it might not look like a lot, but that's actually all he needs because he's a very basic type character. He just fights with his hands. I'll get into that in just a second. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with him, Kamen Rider Agito is the lead protagonist of the second Hesei era Kamen Rider series back in 2001. He's personally one of my favorite Kamen Riders and from my favorite series pretty much of all time. It's a really great show. Definitely recommend it even if you're not into Kamen Rider. It's just really cool and very well made and still one of my favorite shows to date. Just period. Without even any qualifiers, just one of my favorite TV shows, period. Anyway, this is his basic sort of ground form before he has any of his upgrades, and it is beautifully sculpted. There was an old SH Figuart of Agito they made back when they pretty much started the line, and it was pretty bad. The plastic was all shiny and kind of cheap looking, and the paint was decent, but the proportions were terrible. He had like these really weird, skinny, gangly limbs, and you can see joints everywhere, and it just looked terrible. But with this, not only are the details crisp and beautiful, the plastic itself has a nice matte finish, which means A, it doesn't really gather fingerprints, and B, it's very accurate to the show, because this is more or less exactly what his costume looked like. I mean, look at this belt. Let me just let this focus here. Look at that belt. Look at the detail there, the paint. Every individual wire is painted. You can see the gems, the unlit little gems in the side of his belt. You can see the little glyph on the side there, and I think they're actually different on each side, just like in the show. This is like a perfect representation of Kamen Rider Agito. Go around to the back, all the details are painted. You would not find that on an American figure, ever. This is just, I mean, look at like the kneecaps, the legs, every detail you could want. The sculpting on the underside of his shoes. If you want any kind of detail that would be on the suit is on this figure. It is perfect. Being an SH Figuart, the articulation on this figure is fantastic. The head goes up and down and rotates around. It goes around all the way. Doesn't really have too much funky chicken movement just because both joints, it has a double joint at the top of the neck instead of a joint at the top and bottom. So you won't quite have that, but that's a fairly unnatural movement anyway. He's got like a full kind of rotary cuff thing down here. If you pull away the shoulder pad, you can see there's like a rotary cuff joint. His arm goes up to about there. Shoulder pads on a like a hinge with a ball joint underneath it or something, so it has like a bit of rotation and movement, and it just generally, like wherever you put the arm, you can kind of readjust the shoulder pad and it'll sort of naturally flow. He's got a full bicep swivel. He's got elbow bend, quite nice. He's got like a hinge with a swivel on each edge, so you could either have the hinge going this way, or you could like rotate it and then have the hinge going this way, so you get both types of wrist movements similar to the, if you're familiar with the wrists on the 2.0 style Figmas, it's like that. Plenty of torso movement. He goes back, he goes forwards, he goes to the side. Just anything you want. Belt kind of loosely sits here, so wherever you want to put it, it'll kind of just sit there. Hips are interesting. The way they're designed, unlike with the Gaim Figuarts where you have like these big old ugly cuts here, you don't really see anything. However, it means you don't get that much hip movement. It's enough. I mean, I certainly couldn't imagine myself personally spreading my legs out more than this. I'm no gymnast, but for the character, I think it works. He was never like super like gymnasticsy. He was always fairly basic in his fighting style, so that's about how far front and back he goes. Again, pretty much all you really need. It's got a thigh swivel. Again, a little limited, but again, pretty much within the human range. I mean, nobody really swivels their leg 180 degrees in real life. I mean, I'm sure there are people who can, but that's not the point. Anyway, basically they cut down a little bit on the hip movement so that you could have a nice uninterrupted design to it that looks way better. Knee, lots of knee movement. And the ankle, there's a cut on the inside so it can tip in really nice and far, but it can't go out too much. There's a toe joint right there. Alright, that's awesome. Goes front, goes back. Basically, every joint that you could possibly ever want on a figure is present here on Kamen Rider Agito. But that's not all, because the other place this absolutely destroys the first SH Figuart is in the accessories side. The original Kamen Rider Agito SH Figuart, the face would swap off for the whole kind of expanded crest for his finisher. On this, you got a whole alternate head, so there's no big ugly seam line running down the side of his head. The original Agito only came with one extra set of hands, and they were like these kind of like angry rage Hulk claw smash hands that really didn't fit the character at all, because he's always a very calm, very relaxed kind of fighter, and the hands just didn't work for any poses. And those were the only hands he had. With this, in addition to the default fists, you get relaxed open hands, you get like flat hands, and you get kind of more tight relaxed hands. All of these are hands that work great with Agito. They fit his character very well, and just, I couldn't have chosen a better accessory layout. And you might be wondering, where's the weapons? Well, Agito doesn't really have weapons. Some of his later forms do have weapons. Ground form is exclusively based around hand-to-hand combat, so there's not much he really would have had anyway. And with the articulation he has, you can pull off pretty much any hand-to-hand combat pose you could ever dream of putting him in. So here I've got Agito in his kind of pre-finisher pose. I got him switched out with the open hands. I got his crest head on. One thing I will mention is that this goes on very tightly, so I tend to just kind of rest it on his neck because the ball joint's really tight and I don't want to risk breaking it. But other than that, this figure is awesome. Now, let's bring in G3X here and put them side by side, because why not? These two are from the same show. They're primary rider and secondary rider. And as you can see, they look phenomenal together. The only thing I will mention is this guy is a little bit tall, or this guy's a little bit short, or maybe both, because there's a bit of a height difference between them. It's not immediately obvious like this, but there's about a half. This guy definitely has about a half head height difference between the two of them. I might throw in a picture right about here that shows you what I'm talking about. But really, as a whole, it's a pretty fantastic figure, and I just absolutely strongly recommend it. Definitely my favorite SH figure I've bought in a while. It's just so fun, and yeah, it doesn't have a lot of weapons, but I kind of like that, because it doesn't mean like makes it so you don't feel like you have to constantly, switch out stuff in order to get the full experience of the figure. You just throw on a pair of hands you like, and you just start posing him, and he's just a really fun, really stable figure. He's pretty solid. Hasn't taken any falls yet, but there's not a lot other than maybe his crest that could break off, so I'm under the impression he's fairly solid, and he's just well painted, and he's just a good quality figure, beautifully packaged, all the right accessories. This is just a really solid 10 out of 10 figure. So yeah, this is Second Soundwave. If you haven't already, go over to Soundwave Gaming and check out my new Language Barrier series. It's pretty awesome. And I guess I'll be seeing you next time.